We continue to fill out the Hornets grid. This time we got to check off the boxes, the most potential and the most wasted potential. David Walker joins us to help us do that very thing. And plus, you down with OPP, Other People's Podcast. Sam Vecini was talking about Brandon Miller and LaMelo Ball. We'll get to that all today on the Locked On Hornets podcast.
You are Locked On Hornets, your daily Charlotte Hornets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
In a minute, cuz we live.
You come to appreciate the beat a lot more when you don't hear it every single day. And I'm appreciative of this beat. Now
that's kind of like me, right? You come to appreciate me more when you don't have to hear me every single day.
You know, it's never been a problem with David because it's not every day that I talk to David, so it's always a pleasant, not even surprise, just a pleasant experience. With you, it's hit or miss, but I'm glad to see you, Doug. I'm glad to see you. I kid. Doug Branson, LOH. Find him there on Twitter. Here he is on YouTube and wherever you get your podcast. You can also find him on his Substack, everyhornetsboxscore.com. I'm Walker Mail. Listen to me on WFNZ every weekday from 12 to 3. And there's David Walker, a family member, an OG member of the podcast. You can find him on Twitter as well at David B. Walker. Thank you for making us your first listen. We're free and available anywhere you get your pods. That does include YouTube. And before we get started, I got to tell you that this episode is brought to you by Gametime. Gametime?
Too late now. Late. Didn't get there.
I thought you nailed it. Download the Gametime app, create an account. Use code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, download Gametime today. What time is it? Game time. Hornets grid. Yeah, you didn't even try that time. We're filling out the Hornets grid. We're bringing on people to help us fill out the Hornets grid. We've had David a couple of times help us fill out some boxes. He's also helped us out with the Hornets stat draft. Rod Morrow of the Black Guy Who Tips podcast. He joined us last week to pick the funniest Hornet of all time. Great discussion that lasted a long time because it was so good. If you want to go check that one out as well, listen to it again. Now, here we are with David. We're going with most potential and most wasted potential. I feel like I need some clarity on this. Okay. Because in the bullet point, it was most potential slash wasted potential. It was like, yeah, I guess that means the same thing, right? Because if it's the most potential means that there's something unrealized, unless we're picking like just straight up from a current member of the roster. And wasted potential obviously is all bust. And so I thought maybe they mean the same thing. Can you guys help me with some clarity on this? David, real quick, how do you see most potential compared to most wasted?
Oh, well, these two stood out to me immediately when we first started doing this as the trickiest ones, I think, and maybe the ones with the most room for interpretation. But I want to say I've struggled with this. I've just looked at it from several different angles, and I'll be interested to have a deep diving conversation with you guys because I do have some honorable mentions, and then we're just going to have to talk through my choices here, Doug. But I mean, look. I think you could go a lot of different ways with these two categories, especially with the Hornets, because there have been several times where maybe we have an addition, maybe we have a draft pick, maybe we have someone that we think is going to lead us or take us in a new direction. And more times than not, it doesn't work out. So I don't know, Doug, how'd you feel about these two?
I think for me, most potential is the player that the Hornets drafted or maybe acquired very early in their career that had when you viewed them, they had the most like, oh, this person's either going to be all-star, all-NBA, or, top 50 player of all time, top 20 player of all time, greatest of all time. Like, what was the potential? What was the ceiling? And then most wasted potential could be, if we expected someone to be an all-NBA player, maybe not a greatest of all time, but an all-NBA player, and they turned out to be nothing, that could be most wasted potential while not having the most potential, because there could have been a player that maybe could have been a top 50 player of all time, but ended up just being a perennial all-star. Like that's still, that gap is not as wide. So the wasted potential is the gap, and the potential is the measure, like what's the highest we've ever had a player or thought of a player as.
Okay, so let's start with the guest here. All right, what are you bringing to the table, David? With let's start with just most potential, not the gap, but the most potential that we've ever seen from a drafted Hornet or maybe even a signed Hornet early in their career.
Yeah. I think it's easy to start with drafted, and that's where I'm going to end up. But I think, first of all, for me, a couple honorable mentions, if I may. I think you have to look directly at Larry Johnson because he was the first huge draft pick here in Charlotte. He was the first famous player to kind of transcend and be bigger than the city for a national sports franchise. And I always think of Larry Johnson as having that potential. I think you throw Alonzo into that mix as well, for sure, just because of their prowess coming out of college, right? They were huge. It gets dicier, I think, when you look at the current Hornets team, but just because the draft picks have been a little more hit or miss. Drafting now, I think, is trickier, just in general. But guys, I'm going with the current player.
Yeah.
And I'm going with number one,
Steph Curry. One
of one, Mr. Rare.
I think this is the right choice. Yeah.
It's LaMelo Ball for me. And I just think when he drafted that draft, the pick of LaMelo Ball, what we're kind of still waiting for, I think that potential is still out there. And what we've seen, he acquired that all-star status early on. He's been plagued by injuries. And people are now, starting to doubt him quite a bit. But to me, I think he still is the draft pick with the most potential, hype potential, talent potential. You mentioned it before, all NBA potential, Doug. It's LaMelo Ball for me.
What you got, Doug? What do you think? Is this the right choice?
So I think that David named the three names that really are the only three names worthy of consideration. And I would take LJ out of the conversation only because I don't recall, and I've done a lot of diving into, classic Charlotte Observer newspaper articles for Every Hornets Boxscore research. And there was obviously a fascination with him, and he's like, oh, this guy can do things that players aren't supposed to do at that position. But I don't remember reading a lot of conversations about him having the potential to be one of the NBA greats. And people that watched it closely, some of our older listeners can argue with me about that in the comments. Please do let me know, educate me. But I just don't recall.
Different time.
I think Zoe more so. The problem with Zoe is he was kind of right alongside there with Shaq, and the center position was so loaded that it was tough to view him. But he's the one that got to Hall of Fame status, and so I think it really is between LaMelo and Zoe. And then I want to throw one more wrench into here, and that's Brandon Miller. I think the reason we talk about LaMelo now is because we've seen flashes of glory in that Rookie of the Year campaign. And, he's already made an all-star. But I think Brandon jumps into this discussion if he makes a significant leap this season, because then, we can start seriously talking about we've kind of hinted, hey, he's got all NBA potential, but, we need to see that sort of burst onto the scene that we got a little bit in his rookie season, but I think there needs to be that next level. But I think David's right. LaMelo is kind of the guy that we see as, even more so than Zoe, has the potential, if certain things fall into place, to be one of the best guards of his generation.
Go ahead, David. I know you had some thoughts on Doug's comments.
Yeah, I was just going to say with LJ, he was almost like a finished product, or had almost hit his ceiling, I think, just at UNLV. Like, that team was such a phenomenon. That college team was so well known that, like, when the Hornets drafted LJ, it was like, oh my God, we got a guy. Right. Like, we knew he would come in and be a stud, and he was right away. Grandmama thing, he's on Family Matters, he's doing the dunk contest. Like, he was an NBA phenomenon, but it was also the Michael Jordan era, the Knicks era. Like, that 90s was just tough sledding. And also, I think LJ hit his peak here. He had longevity as a career, but the back stuff kind of, hurt him. He played in New York. He had, the 4-point play. He had famous NBA moments, but he was such a finished product and a talented player when he landed in Charlotte, and he did great things here. I think that was the peak of his basketball career, like, playing talent-wise. But it was just so close to where he was when he came here. Like, it's much more of a finished product, I think.
Well, and so, all right, you're a number 1 overall draft pick. Already you got a lot of potential. So that's
Right.
step 1, and he checks that box off. To be a part of among the most famous basketball teams in college basketball history and be the lead dog on the rosters with Stacey Augmon and Greg Anthony and all those guys, and he was by far, like, that's the dude you want in the draft. I think that speaks to a lot of it. Alonzo is interesting because his career played out the closest to what you would call the pinnacle. When they came out with their 75th anniversary team, Alonzo wasn't on it, but he was like this honorable mention. Hey, his name was tossed around. He eventually didn't make it. But if we had a top 100 list, maybe Alonzo would have made it around that time. And that's no small feat to be a top 100 NBA basketball player to have ever played. LaMelo, to me, it's different because Alonzo's is realized. He was the second pick, but again, you're right, Doug. It was Shaq. So you're kind of grading on a curve to a certain extent. With LaMelo, it wasn't realized at the time of his draft. He was the 3rd overall pick in what was considered a weak draft already. So it's not like you were selecting Shaquille O'Neal. Other people loved LaMelo. They flat out knew that he was going to be a star. I didn't know that he was going to be a star. There are some other guys that I liked too, but when they selected him, I was like, man, this has potential to be extremely fun. I'm here for it. I think I tweeted out, get your popcorn ready. And then he wins Rookie of the Year, and it is realized immediately. He has an all-star appearance his second year in the league. We were having MVP conversations. We were so excited about Cam Newton winning the MVP in 2015, and we still hadn't had a player in a professional sport reach those heights before, certainly not with the Hornets. And so when he wins Rookie of the Year, and like the only reason it's close is because Anthony Edwards has a nice last 2 months, but also LaMelo wasn't playing anymore. Tyrese Halliburton was still going with the efficiency on the West Coast, but not the raw volume numbers that LaMelo was putting up. So it was pretty clear in a way. Like, LaMelo should win Rookie of the Year even if he was hurt. Man, MVP, All-NBA, it wasn't maybe he could get All-NBA. We were having MVP discussions. That's why I'm totally with you, David. I think because of the conversations we were having, even if it wasn't known before the draft to a lot of people, we got there pretty damn quickly. After the first month, it was, okay, yeah, we got the best player in this NBA draft class. So I think it is the most potential. I think you're right. You nailed it. LaMelo Ball should be in that box.
Okay,
Excellent.
well, I think that's 3 votes, and then Reddit also had LaMelo as the most potential.
Yes.
There you go.
Before we go to most wasted potential in the next segment, I just do have to remark that we talked about 2 guys from the 90s, and then we had to fast forward all the way into the 2020s before we got to someone with most potential, and that is the NBA draft history of the Charlotte Hornets.
Yeah, lots of trading. That not as many draft picks, right? Like Baron Davis was your draft pick, and maybe there's some conversation to be had. He's probably in a different tier than those guys we were talking about, even though we love Diddy. But Jamal trade, David Wesley wasn't even an original Hornet. He came from the Celtics. Elton Campbell was a Laker. It was this team of vets that were good. That PJ Brown, Miami, right? Like it wasn't in the drafts, but they were, good enough to have the most successful playoff team we've ever had. So
that's a great point, Doug. I mean, in doing this research, if you just search up Charlotte Hornets draft history, which people that just want to feel pain, I'm sure have done before. It doesn't take very long to get to Rex Chapman, like as you're scrolling down and like you're looking for, oh yeah, there's one that popped. Oh yeah, there's a superstar. And I mean, you do pass Kobe Bryant. You do pass Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. There's some picks in there.
The Hornets literally passed Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. They drafted him and then passed him.
Mm-hmm.
It's crazy, but that's where we are. That's who we are.
All right, so it's settled. Kobe Bryant is most potential with the Hornets draft history.
That would be such a troll pick. That would be amazing.
It would be. Yeah, it would be such a troll pick. All right, let's move on. Coming up next on the Locked On Hornets podcast.
Don't go to sleep on the Hornets
We did most potential. Now it's time for most wasted potential. Not a lot of hater picks, but we're starting to dabble. There's a lot of hater boxes still to be filled, and we are choosing to do that part of the work later rather than the fun part. So we'll get to that in just a moment. Coming up next, Locked On Hornets. This episode is brought to you by BetterHelp. What's something you'd love to learn? As an adult, do you make time to learn new things as often as you would like, or was that kind of lost in childhood? Kids are always learning and growing, but as adults, sometimes we lose that curiosity. What's something you'd like to learn? Gardening, a new language, maybe how to finally beat your best friend in bowling, anything like that. Therapy can help you reconnect with your sense of wonder because your back-to-school era can come at any age. If you're thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online, designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. Just fill out a brief questionnaire to get matched with a licensed therapist, and then you can switch therapists anytime for no additional charge. Rediscover your curiosity with BetterHelp. Visit BetterHelp.com/LockedOnNBA today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, H-E-L-P, BetterHelp.com/LockedOnNBA. More Locked On Hornets ahead. Most potential, now most wasted potential. Doug, how much have you thought about some of the candidates and as we dabble into the hater picks?
I'm going to tell you that there are going to be a lot more names on this list than the list that, and these are, it's an inverse relationship, right? So if there weren't a lot on the most potential, they still drafted a lot of players in that span between the early 90s and the 2020s. So there are going to be a lot of names that we thought, could have reached certain heights and did not. Should I tell you who Reddit selected? Because I think Reddit's selection is actually one of the only controversial selections of their selections.
Let's see if we can get there, because I haven't seen it. So don't tell us, and then we can have a conversation without knowing that.
Okay, so I'm just going to reel off some names. I'm not sure that I've decided, but I'll just set the table for this discussion, and I'm going to set the table with a knife right to Walker's heart and say Malik Monk is sitting there.
I knew you were going to do it. I knew you were
as most wasted.
Me, yeah.
I knew you were going to do it. Yep. I refused to believe that. I refused to put that on the list. I was looking at the Hornets draft history, and I saw all those names David was talking about, and I got to Malik Monk. I was like, this is going to be the first and maybe the choice that Doug Branson rolls with, but it's going to be the first name he mentions, and I was dead right about it.
Well, I'm going to say you need better help, because I think you've got a little bit of a block that won't allow you to deal with some of the trauma that was involved.
You have a block, sir.
Let's see. Now you're lashing out. James Bouknight, you got to throw him in there.
Yeah, a lot of people did.
A lot of shuddering. Yeah, I mean, honestly, that's probably, I'm going to wait to hear your discussion on this, but that might be leader in the clubhouse for me. Let's go with some classic names, though. You mentioned Sexy Rexy, Rex Chapman. I think you have to throw him in there. Now, he was not it wasn't a number one overall selection. I believe he went first selection for the Charlotte Hornets as a franchise. But there was a lot of hope for him coming out of Kentucky, big-time prospect. And, didn't live up to it. And Rex would admit that, some attitude issues, some issues with the team that sort of wasted, I think, some of his potential. J.R. Reed, you got to throw him in there. Yep. Let's go to Bobcats. How about Raymond Felton, Sean May? I mean, you could probably go Felton.
Ray.
Hey, I know. Listen, you're wearing the UNC hat. Look. I know we're both alumni, but you got to look at that draft and maybe just that draft instead of naming players. Just that draft, wasting the potential of the Charlotte Bobcats with that one. Two final names here. Miles Bridges is a name I think you can throw now.
Interesting.
And that story's not completely written yet, but there was a lot of potential, and we'll see where that goes. And then Derek Coleman is going to be an outside pick for me. Ooh. Not in the sense that he was like that
name, yeah,
because he wasn't drafted obviously by the Charlotte Hornets, but they brought him in to help keep the Hornets in the playoff discussion in a moment of transition for the franchise. Coming over from the Nets, there was a lot of hope that he was going to carry this franchise into its next iteration. And all of those hopes were dashed by injuries and attitude and weight issues. And so Derek Coleman, I think you could throw him into that discussion as well.
Yeah, I mean, I had J.R. Reed and Malik Monk on the draft pick side for sure. And look, I mean, anybody could kind of finagle this category for many, many, many draft picks of the Charlotte Hornets. But, I don't even think you can't throw Adam Morrison in there just because it never happened, right? I don't know. I think people were excited, but it just was such a flop from day one.
Yeah,
that
goes to my point in the first segment. The thing that makes LaMelo above Brandon right now is that we've seen a glimpse, and Brandon has the opportunity to glimpsify this discussion. Adam Morrison, even though I don't think we remember quite how well he played because the Bobcats stunk and he didn't really get to the level that everybody thought he could. He did play well. It's just he never gave us that glimpse.
Yeah. The J.R. Reed one's funny because obviously at the time, like that was the second draft, I believe, for the Charlotte Hornets. Obviously, Carolina being in the area, J.R. Reed, huge college player at UNC. So, and one I wanted to pick and just didn't work out. Oddly enough, on his second time around, he had a really good run and then got traded, I believe, right at the deadline, just because it had to kind of happen. But that was a semi-redemption story for him. What are you going to say?
Well, J.R. Reed was interesting because, he came in and the team wanted J.R. Reed to put on weight and become like a physical presence inside, power forward. And J.R. Reed, well, they wanted him to be more physical. They wanted him to get bigger, not maybe put on weight, but like get stronger, be more physical. And he wanted to be a star player. He wanted to score. He wanted to do a lot of other things. Then maybe there was a clash there. And so when we're talking about this potential situation, like wasted potential, it's not always about a player fooling around. So much of this, and it's why you saw even in this draft, there were players angling not to be in Washington or not to be in Atlanta or not to be the number one overall pick. And you go, why wouldn't you want to be the number one overall pick? Because you can go all the way back through NBA history and see that player and situation, so much of realizing your potential is being with the right team structure.
Yep. Now Walker, I've got another candidate here, and the one that I had settled on, unless you have some other thoughts you want to throw in there, because we've been talking for a while.
So I've got a tiny list. J.R. Reed was on here. I'm interested that both you guys brought him up, I guess, but also I'm gonna make a comment that you guys are a little older than I am, so perhaps you remember that. I was like, ooh, let me sneak in this J.R. Reed pick. Oh, let's see if this is kind of sneaky. You're like, no, we lived it. This is stupid. Of course he needs to be on the list. Noah Vonleh. I'm kind of going with picks that this is the conversation where we go to, okay, bust versus never did anything in the NBA, right? People were so excited about Vonleh falling to them at 8. Still a higher draft pick than a James Bouknight at 11, a Malik Monk at 11. Vonleh was a higher draft pick, had a lot of potential at Indiana, big guy that could shoot, was going to usher in a new day and age of NBA basketball as we were starting to shift, but never did anything, right? Like, so you're right. If you're envisioning this as having shown something on an NBA court, then Vonleh is thrown away. But if we're talking about guys that were drafted coming out of college, Rick Bonnell used to say it all the time. He was the most asked about player from Hornets fans than anybody else on that roster.
That's classic.
Rick Bonnell mailbag on the Charlotte Observer. It was everyone wanting to know about Vonleh because people were excited. Hey, he fell. He's got potential. Let's do it. But you're right. In terms of realized anything, there weren't even any flashes on an NBA court. No. There absolutely was at Indiana. So Vonleh was one.
I mean, that's tough for me because look, if I don't know how to cook and I make a meal and that meal is trash and we have to throw it away, did I waste that meal or did I just not know how to cook?
Well, it depends. Did people think that you might become a great chef one day, or were you just some rando?
And I don't know that we thought Noah Vonleh. I don't know. Maybe I was excited about the pick, but I didn't think Noah Vonleh was going. I didn't have some dream of Noah Vonleh becoming one of the best players. But we talked early on that this was about gap, and the gap between whatever we thought he was and not knowing how to play basketball.
That's right.
Is significant.
Go ahead, David. Or you have Vonleh thoughts?
Well, I definitely had him in the discussion. He's definitely ranked higher on this or lower, however you want to look at it. Like he and Malik Monk were similar scenarios because they both fell. And we were both excited. I was very excited for Malik Monk pick. I mean, I think a lot of people are, so I think he's worthy of being there. But no, that's what I was just going to say. Vonleh just kind of the Adam Morrison thing never hit. We never saw it. So
unlike Monk, I know the conversations we have about Monk. Monk is like the most brought up Hornet not on this team. We bring him up all the time.
Oh, yeah.
But with Monk, he actually, that's my whole thing. Like, I actually did think he did a decent amount, shooting 40% from three his last year. Like, Vonleh didn't have a 40% season, right? Like, he doesn't have anything like that. Ooh, so there's not that conversation to be had. The last couple, I had J.R. Reed. There's two more. MKG. So MKG comes in, was an absolute freaking stud at Kentucky. Even if he couldn't shoot, we knew he couldn't shoot. He realized a lot of the defensive potential with the Bobcats / Hornets. I always hate having the convo about him being a bust because he did get to a second contract. And I remember when he got hurt, man, everybody was saying, hey, those 7 games that he played, he looked really good. He was a really important part of this team. Is there any way that we can hang on to where we get to another level of a top 2 pick? I know people wanted Bradley Beal. There were also Carolina fans that wanted Harrison Barnes. But I did like what MKG provided. And then we never saw that next step, even though the body, the athleticism, the ability to get out and transition, the grit. I love MKG, and I hate that we couldn't get to another level. So I brought him up for this discussion too.
I'm going to say something crazy. And it really is swaying my decision. I might be gravitating towards MKG right now because one, we talk about Malik Monk. What was he, 11? Book Night was...
That's what I'm saying. The draft pick stuff matters to me.
A lot of this stuff is we're talking about guys who were going to be kind of iffy anyway, and they went from iffy to, whoa, that's... wow. But MKG, if he realizes like half his potential, if he stays even remotely healthy, we're probably doing the Locked On Bobcats show right now. Like, it changes the course of franchise history, I think, because
dude
he was
had
that
some stuff, man. I mean, I hate it. It's actually like one of the more sad stories for me because of how it all went down with MKG.
And he gave us a glimpse, right? That 7 games of glory where he was shooting the basketball well, and the team looked. And that's what I'm saying. We could be doing Locked On Bobcats right now if those 7 games of MKG that we got, those 7 minutes in heaven in the closet, if we had gotten that for 2 seasons, I think it completely changes the trajectory. And I think people here most wasted. And they go immediately to, and I think this is why David didn't want to necessarily have this discussion, because you go to the negative context of guys like James Bouknight, who came in and effed it all up themselves. But that's not necessarily always the case, whether it be the structure like I talked about with Reed or injuries with MKG. Waste is waste. And I might be gravitating towards MKG.
I might be too. And I'll tell you what, he gave Hornets fans PTSD for up until now. Like, when you hear about someone needing to work on their jump shot, Hornets fans are automatically scared, because that was the thing with MKG. It was like, if he can just develop that jump shot. Most people, the fact of the matter is, most people, I would say, do develop some sort of effective jumper or offensive game, then do not at all. And like MKG just never, he tried to tweak that jumper. He tried to make it work a bunch of different ways, and it never happened. And that's why people were scared off, even in this draft, with, oh gosh, we're not going to draft another like wing player that can't shoot, right? LaMelo had shooting concerns coming into the draft. People that were scared of that. So like, I think there's an affinity for MKG for people that watch those Bobcats years and rooted for him. He's such a good guy. He works so hard. He does it so much still to this day, like with education and in his community and stuff like that. Solid guy. Maybe shied away from the spotlight, but just it never worked out. The potential thing is there with him. And I didn't include him on my list probably because I was rooting for him so hard and wanted him to be that guy. But I got a name for you guys. It has not been brought up. He was not a draft pick. In my eyes.
I think I know it, but go ahead. What, did it happen around 2013, 14? Was it around that area?
I think so. I think so. This guy came in. He was the potential running mate to Kemba Walker. He was the potential answer that we had been looking for to solve the backcourt problem, to finally give the Hornets a marquee shooting guard and a defensive player.
This is a mistake.
Lance.
Say his name. It's correct. You're so right. David, it's the last name I have on my list. I have written down Lance Stevenson. The dude led the NBA in triple-doubles for a playoff team that battled against LeBron. Yes. He's on the list. If we're talking gap, was there a bigger gap with what we thought we were getting compared to what we got? We were excited. Gordon Hayward, we can't get him. We got a better player in Lance anyway.
Gordon Hayward should be on the list too, I think.
I know. Gordo was on my list too. No, Lance Stevenson, he came in. Did you guys look up what he shot from 3 his lone season in Charlotte?
Terrible.
17.
You're so close to the camera right now. This is the closest you've ever been to the camera.
It was
17%, man. I mean, Doug, you and I were dancing. We were doing the Lance dance when he came in. And you talk about someone, I was like, I don't think he can play in the NBA anymore. Like, he's not an effective basketball player. And, like, he left here and had a couple more flashes, but I've never seen someone get to a situation and just – it was like the Monstars. It was like someone had literally – I've never seen that before. They literally took his basketball talent, and it did not come with him to Charlotte. I mean, and that was – we had high hopes for that. He won a game and got up on the scoreboard, dude, and the whole building was going crazy. And I was like, this is it. We can build from here. And it was just a thud.
Yeah.
Yeah, I wonder if we are overrating what we thought his impact would be, and then, because that affects the gap. Because I agree with you, his bottom is very reminiscent of Book Night, but in different situations where a guy Book Night comes in and you expect him to make some impact and ends up making zero or less than zero negative impact. But that the whole Book Night situation, we really haven't dug into that. But that was like Malik Monk, I think, is near the bottom of this list. I wouldn't even really seriously consider him. But Book Night, I would seriously consider for most wasted potential because again, it's about gap. I understand he wasn't a top pick, and so he's going to be 50-50 anyway. But not only not contributing anything, would you expect a first-round pick, a lottery pick, to contribute something? Even Frank Kaminsky was able to play on a playoff team and have some impact, right? So that's why he doesn't make this discussion. But Book Night not only does nothing, he almost rips the team apart. He's fighting the coach. Like, it's incredible. This conversation is incredibly painful.
Okay, let's actually finish some of those thoughts. Coming up next on the Locked On Hornets podcast.
I'm in pain.
Let's experience more pain with most wasted potential. We're diving right in. No, just dipping our toes in the water. We are diving headfirst into the wasted potential box. It's coming up next on Locked On Hornets. This episode is brought to you by Gametime. Gametime? Gametime has a new feature called Gametime Picks that makes getting tickets for your favorite live events even easier. Gametime Picks filters out all the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. Plus, what you can do is you can experience all of the different deals, the zone deals, the flash deals. They have seat views where you can get a panoramic view from your seat in the app before you buy. And they also have a lowest price guarantee. Or Gametime will credit you 110, not just 100, which would be sufficient, 110% of the difference. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, use code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem code LOCKEDONNBA. Locked On NBA. Download Gametime today. What time is it? Gametime.
Gametime.
More Locked On Hornets ahead.
A couple of quick things. We still haven't gotten to who Reddit selected that I think is the most controversial pick on this list, and so I can reveal that in a moment. I just want to get this out of the way right now. Sam Vecini, the OPP discussion about the 24 under 24, that's going to get bumped again, second straight show. Sorry, Sam. We will talk about this podcast with some interesting stuff. And LaMelo and Brandon being on the list, but where they were on the list is what makes it interesting. So stay tuned for that discussion later in the week. We're going to have Nada on as well. Nada Edwards is going to come on and help us finish this grid, because that's the thing. Reddit has already finished this grid. We have got to finish something this summer. We've got to finish one single thing this summer.
I feel good about it. I feel better about this. What we are not going to do for another year is finish who wore it best. That's not going to happen if I've come to accept it. But we are going to finish the Hornets grid, and I'm excited about being able to finish something, no doubt about it.
So Reddit had Larry Johnson as the most wasted potential. Oh, wow. It's a name we have not discussed yet as most wasted potential. The back issues, I think, are playing the factor, is the main factor here, in that he was going to be so great and it was taken away by injuries. But I don't know. I feel like you could make that case for MKG better, that even though MKG's ceiling probably not as high as LJ's ceiling, I think you could make that case more for MKG than you could for LJ, because he still had a career after that.
Yeah, here's the problem with LJ. You got to remember at the time LJ came in, the Hornets had been middling. I mean, that was their existence. He, like I said, took them to the front page. He took them to the national spotlight. He took them to the All-Star weekend dunk contest. Like I said, he was on Family Matters. Like he took them to a place that they hadn't been ever. The city of Charlotte had not been ever. And like, yes, the wins did not come. And if you're saying we thought that he would be the guy to take us to the finals, I get that argument, but I just can't go along with wasted potential for LJ just because of the heights he took the Hornets and how young they were, and like you just hadn't seen it before.
Yeah, I think that's right. If you thought he was going to take you to the finals, then okay, perhaps you could craft an argument. He's a two-time All-Star before he even reaches 26 years old. He was Rookie of the Year, so he comes with some accolades. Realized, like those are nice accolades.
Dream Team 2, I think, or Dream Team
under discussed. Can you be a Monstar and have wasted potential and also not be the worst Monstar? Like he was at least the third best with Muggsy and Sean Bradley on that team, so I think that's another argument to consider. Perhaps you could craft one because of all the hype surrounding that UNLV team. I mean, that team was so star-studded, and he was the lead guy, being a number one pick. But man, he did a lot. Like, there was a lot he did realize. So you had to think that there is no margin for error for what you think he becomes if you think he's most wasted potential. The two-time All-Star at 25 years old. That means you think he's MVP, like one-time champion, right? Like and that's hard for me to believe. Like it's okay if you don't reach those heights. I'm trying to go with realistic wasted potential, and I don't think that's true with Larry Johnson.
All right, so I'm pretty settled. I'm going to select MKG here, and then I do have an additional question, which is we put LaMelo as most potential. How close is he to being on both of these boxes?
No.
Well, Larry is right. That's the craft. Well, yeah, like I think it's if he's injured again, and then everybody that is a LaMelo stan and what they say is true, that he eventually asks out of Charlotte, and then he leaves the organization somehow, some way, and the Hornets decide, all right, well, at least we have Brandon Miller. LaMelo wants out. That's fine. That's not happening, by the way, but I'm creating a scenario that we see with disgruntled stars, and I would understand why LaMelo Ball is frustrated because the Hornets don't win a whole lot. Yeah, if he leaves or is injured again and we have one All-Star and a Rookie of the Year to show for it, and that's it with like not as many wins as LJ. I think that's the separating factor. Not as many wins, not as, the moments aren't there as much as we had with Larry, Alonzo, and Muggsy. Not LaMelo's fault, but maybe. Yeah. Like I don't think so, but I could see how you could craft that argument too.
Oh, if he spends another year on the injury list, I mean, he's definitely in he's in the conversation. He's not in it now, but if he spends another year on the injury list where he plays 22 games, then yeah, he's definitely in the conversation. And then we have to wait till the story ends to really cement it, because all these players that we've been talking about, we know how it all ends.
But this goes back to my original question, right? Like, this is a very fine line in what is dividing both of these. So yes, we were trying to figure out what the differentiator is, and then we realized that two names could be put in both of these boxes.
I believe
time is a flat circle.
Well, I saw someone do a Phoenix Suns one, and DeAndre Ayton was on both, which is just kind of a drive-by. But I mean, I guess you could get it, but I don't think LaMelo. I think I wouldn't put him there. Hey,
I'm not kidding though. I do think second on this list is Lance. I feel I have no problem if you wanted to put second place.
It was mine.
I mean, the thing, I watched that Indiana Pacers team a lot, right? And Lance
your favorite team.
Yes. Right. You like to task me with that. But he was sick with that team that competed with LeBron and brought them to a 7-game series. So it's one of those like James Harden type of feels. You bring him from like 6-man back end starter and you let him go thrive and run wild with the new team. Does he have an all-star appearance? Again, led the league in triple doubles. It was does nothing. Like it
Well,
was
then
so
stand
bad.
up and say Lance, and then let David break the tie. You want to go Lance? I'll go MKG. David can break the tie.
No, I don't have a problem with MKG. I don't have a problem with it. I'm sorry.
If that's the case,
it.
I'm throwing my vote for the record for my man Lance. Born ready. I'm still a
You
fan.
could have had it. You could have had it, Walker.
Number
Could've been yours.
two in most improved player voting, but right before he got to Charlotte, and then didn't exist. Number 2 didn't exist.
Did he win? Did he win most unimproved? Like, can you?
Oh my God!
Yeah. There's got to be the biggest fall. Congratulations. Here's the biggest fall off. Yeah.
So
and then by the way, goes back and like has like a second coming in the NBA.
Normal playing.
Yeah.
Above 17% shooting from three. So I think if we're going to NKG, it has to be we're going with NKG with love and respect, right?
Mm-hmm.
This is, for sure.
With pain,
Tremendous.
with sadness, with sadness in our heart.
Doug, can you put that in the graphic just so people see it? Can you
love.
find a way to
Some
put
hearts?
MK
I can put some hearts in there
with,
for sure.
with love and respect, and then have the picture of MKG.
I want to do it in like
Doug, no disrespect. But here.
No disrespect. In like scripty language, like some of those signs that you see like in Target. It'll just be like live, laugh, love. Sorry, but it's you, MKG.
And in order to embody that even more so, you can't put the picture of the elbow in. You can't.
No. Okay, that's fine. That's fair. That's fair. I will find a suitable piss. It's like we're having a funeral. Like I'll put the little I'll put the flower.
I knew this was going to be tough, man.
Put the flower arrangement around the picture and make it like glossy. Like those '80s glossy photos. I'll do it right. Don't worry. Stay tuned. Tomorrow
I trust
or
you.
whenever we air the next episode, you'll see the grid again and you'll see MKG's picture.
Okay. Any other conversations we want to have? Did we suffice in our James Bouknight convo, Doug? Because I know a lot of people did bring him up when the Hornets Reddit was filling out this grid too.
Yeah, well, if Bouknight had been drafted top 5, that's the only thing keeping him out of this discussion is that he was a lottery pick, but he wasn't a high lottery pick, and in a draft that wasn't like the crazy strongest either. But I mean, it is again. We talked about this here. I'll put a bow on the show. We talked about early in the show how incredible it was in the most potential discussion that we went from early 90s to 2020s before we could find another player that was worthy of entering the discussion. It is in the inverse incredible that a player that didn't see the floor for any significant rotation time for more than like a 5 to 10 game stretch, that was a lottery pick, that fought his head coach, is not selected as most wasted potential. That is incredible. That is incredible.
Can I just sprinkle a little Kai Jones in there before we leave?
Oh God! Why did you? I tried it. Talk about a block. I've been trying to block it out. Yeah,
Sorry.
we just throw that out there too. But again, that's all draft position, right? That's all draft position. If Kai Jones, if Kai Jones was a high lottery pick, it would have been a different story.
That body alone brings you in the conversation. Being able to do those things, being able to do that stuff. That brings you in the combo. All right, we'll end on that sad note. That'll do it for Locked On Hornets. Thanks for making us your first listen. Be sure to make Locked On NBA your second listen, and you can catch both of those pods on YouTube and anywhere you get your podcast. A big thanks to David Walker helping us out. You can follow him on Twitter at David B. Walker. Hot Shoe Takes also helping us out. Keep up to date with all the local fashion. Panthers, Pegasus, Sweet Shoe, LaMelo, new release. Maybe we talk about that next time. There's Doug Branson, everyhornetsboxscore.com. Go check it out. And then check me out on Wes and Walker. I'm Walker Mail. Listen to me from 12 to 3 every weekday on Sports Radio 92.7 WFNZ. Have a great rest of your day. Nada joins us tomorrow to help us a little more with this Hornets grid.